Hi, I'm Angela Cavanaugh, the Executive Director of CAI. I would like to welcome all attendees and thank our partners, the Board of Directors, and the CAI team for today's program. A few housekeeping rules. Today, all participants will be muted. Please type your questions into the question box and be sure to state the panelists that you would like the question directed to. If you would like a certificate for manager's credits, please email Jackie at Jacqueline, Jaclyn, at CAI-NJ.org. And just to note that you must be in attendance for the entire program to qualify for a certificate. I now turn it over to Deborah Rizzi from our membership committee. Deb, welcome.
Thank you so much, Angela. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Deborah Rizzi, and I'm the president of RISCO, a brand-led marketing agency based out of Spring Lake. I've been a member of CAI New Jersey for 1.5 years now, and I'm also a proud member of the membership committee. I wanted to welcome you all to this event and educate you on the value of being a member of this incredible organization that consists of homeowner leaders, managers and management companies, and business partners. I play a role in many organizations, and I can't say enough about the value that CAI New Jersey has played, especially over the past 6 months, in providing valuable resources that have helped my business stay strong during this pandemic. I've also made invaluable connections and friends along the way, and I hope that you do too. So to highlight some of the key areas for our homeowner leaders, the best community associations have the best boards, and they're educated, knowledgeable, and prepared to lead their communities successfully. We want to help your board succeed. CAI members have access to our ADR program, which is a cost-effective way to fulfill your association's legal obligations. And CAI also provides a robust library of content for community leaders, as well as ongoing virtual opportunities. We give you access to industry leaders in areas such as accounting, engineering, insurance, and legal counsel, and not to mention that you can have 3 to 15 board members and key volunteers added at one low price. For managers and management companies, you have access to our online directory of industry leaders to help your communities navigate these during these unparalleled times, and you can earn continuing education credits at a free or discounted rate. For our business partners like me, CAI provides an amazing opportunity to build your brand and also provides necessary education to support your business, especially through educational Zoom webinars like today. There are networking opportunities and other industry leaders that connect both in person and virtually. So the really good stuff now is the upcoming events that we have coming. So tomorrow, September 17th, is the Make-A-Wish Tricky Tray. It's hosted by FAST, and there's still chances available online. I hear that there are amazing prizes this year, so you don't want to miss out on that, and also have the opportunity to give back to a worthy cause. On Friday, September 18th at 2 p.m., we have the HOA Family Feud, which is always fun to participate in. And then next week at the same time, we have our weekly webinars. On October 1st at 4 p.m., there's a virtual happy hour for business partners only who want to learn more about our industry and freshen up their contact list. And most of all, we have the 2020 virtual trade show that's going to be hitting starting the beginning of October. You and your company can be featured on our website for up to 6 months, along with other leading industry professionals. If you have any questions regarding renewing or becoming a member, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is Deborah, D-E, B as in boy, R-A, at RISCO, R-I-Z-C-O.com. Just remember, the best way to maximize your membership is through engagement. Follow us on social media, attend events, and introduce yourself to somebody participating in this event. We're here to help you, and we hope you enjoy this great event. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Deb. So first up, we have Robert Putterman. Robert Putterman is the founder and president of Regal Restoration. His passion for developing and sustaining relationships and strong attention to detail are both deeply rooted in Regal Restoration's core competencies. Regal Restoration services its New Jersey Community Association clients with the utmost care and consideration. The team's extensive experience, depth of industry knowledge, and the dedication to each project are what separate them from their competitors. Welcome, Robert.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having us. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to stay in front of our partners. I consider each and every one of you a partner. So for us to discuss safety, pretty much safe business practices while navigating COVID-19. So just so you know a little bit about our company, we are a full service general contracting firm who predominantly focuses in the condo association world. We do about 550 to 600 jobs a year. So we do focus on a lot of volume, but a lot of the same clients. So once March hit us, it really changed the way that we did our business practices. We did not get shut down because we were doing a lot of work that was deemed mandatory to be completed, whether it was structural repairs, it was roofing projects. So we really had to take this seriously and bring in a lot of the professional partners that we deal with, whether it's an attorney, counsel was very important at that point, and also keeping up with each one of the local and state and federal laws at the current times. It just so happens that our number one core value is safety. So that is what we're going to be focusing on. We're going to go through our acronym, which is SAFE. So it's smart, alert, focused, and educated. This is something that we've had incorporated into our core values for at least 4 years. So we're just going to go through each one of these and explain how we decided to incorporate this into the COVID-19 the way that we do business. So the first one is SMART. So from day one, we took this very seriously. We were fully committed to flattening the curve and ensuring that our practices were keeping, number one, our team safe, number two, of course, our clients safe, and then anyone who we came in contact with, whether or not that was suppliers, deliveries, subcontractors. It's so important that we are all committed to that on this team, because it's the weak link that can really hurt us and hurt others. So the most important thing is consistency. So we have weekly briefings with our council so that we ensure that whatever we have incorporated and rolled out in our protocols are up to the state and local guidelines. And it's not only that, every single Saturday we have conference calls from 9:30 to 10:30 with our entire team, so that we are ensuring that we're consistent with the message that we're delivering, and also we're being consistent with the message that we are portraying and executing to our clients. We've incorporated hand washing stations on any large jobs, anything that we consider over a month. And then we do a lot of work in Manhattan as well. So Manhattan is a different animal when what they consider safe, with signage, daily temperature check screenings, ensuring any employees that go onto the job site, they're not allowed to leave the actual job site. If they are, they're not mandated to come back to the job site once they left. So what we've done is we've tried to take as many of those best practices and incorporated that into New Jersey's business model. Okay, our next one, we're going to go into alert. So we kind of went into that enforcement of site-wide social distancing. It's very challenging to be socially distanced on a construction site, I think, as many of you are aware. So what we try to do when we're working outside, everyone's mandated that you have to have a mask or a face covering on at all times. Things have gotten a little bit more lax on, not with our company, but with just in general, allowing to be eating indoors now. Social gatherings are allowed up to 500 people, I believe, and now indoor gatherings. So things are changing. They're getting a little bit more lax from a governance standpoint, but we are still staying consistent with our message to each and every one of our employees and any subcontractors that are on site. And then we have to, of course, pay attention to surroundings and being mindful of our behavior, because we have to expect that everyone who we come in contact with, that they are as concerned about it as we are from our leadership of our company. So even if other people don't have masks on, we make sure that we have our masks on, we keep our social distance, and each and every one of our team members have PPE that is able to get distributed to anyone who's coming onto our job site. next one is focused. We always want to keep our eye on the finish line with safety coming first. So how that's changed the way that we do things is that the duration of projects have absolutely gone up. It's much more challenging to get jobs completed with the different guidelines that are in place. With wearing masks, it gets tiresome for a lot of the employees out in the field. You know, we're doing parking garages, we're building a school, we're doing facade work. It is very challenging, especially when, you know, you're used to having your rhythms coming up. You know, you're breathing, you're running around, you're lifting up heavy stuff. You know, we're replacing 1,000 sheets of plywood in 4 days. It's a lot of bending down. So things definitely, we want to make sure we're protecting our team members and keeping them safe with ensuring that there's some additional breaks now. Having to take their masks off and go into a safe zone. So it's extremely important that we still have our goals that are communicated to our partners, right? So if we're doing a job for an association, it's extremely important to say, well, I know that normally this job would take 30 days or 45 days. It may take 35 to 50 days now because things have just changed. And we're trying our best to, meet and exceed expectations. Because it's, a lot of the time what we say is we want to communicate a business plan, communicate a schedule, and then we do weekly check-ins to make sure that we're meeting and exceeding that expectation. So goals are extremely important to our team. That's something that we are consistent with setting. That way the goals can come within the organization. Of course, safety being number one, but of course we know we have to get a job done. So it's extremely important that when we're doing a job beforehand, we come and we sit down with the applicable parties and we discuss how we're going to attack this and, make sure that we're meeting and exceeding the deadlines. Okay, and the final one is educated. So it's extremely important that education is incorporated into every one of our projects. We keep the communication lines open. We have a back office, which is the heart of our company. That communication is it's constant all day long. Communication, overly communicate. It's been much different dealing with departments, building departments. It's taken longer. Some of them are not open. Some of them have limited hours. So it's just taken a lot longer. We're doing a church down in Bayhead right now, and it's taking longer to get where we need to be to get the job kicked off. Number one, with the Department of Building, but also suppliers. Suppliers we're doing a fencing project actually with another one of the presenters, and that material is a 16-week lead time. Normally that lead time would have been 4 to 6 weeks. So things have been changing, but as long as we're educating our partners and our clients, that's the only way that you don't blindside someone, because it's, the educational aspect and the communication aspect of projects have become paramount on top of course, safety, rolling out projects, and also, just the education part of it and the communication. Because it was challenging for us to hear a 16-week lead time as well. But it's unfortunate we have to accept that and we have to communicate that out. That way, I'm sorry about that. And communicate that out. That way we're all on the same line, everyone's in the know, and no one is feeling blindsided. And then of course we have an open line of communication. I always say that I want to hear things. Everyone is expected on our job sites, from hard hats to masks and sometimes respirators, depending on what the type of working environment is in. We want to know if someone is not being compliant to that. We temperature check on every one of our job sites. Anyone who's coming onto our job site is temperature checked. We put that into a database. That way we can be a part of any potential adherence for contact tracing. So anyone with a temperature above 100, which, thankfully we haven't had anybody above 98.6, they're not allowed on our job site, and there's no ifs or buts. That's it. We have a rapid testing center that we deal with up in Greenbrook. Once they get their test back, that's kind of how we deal with the situations. So we take this extremely seriously. We're consistent with our practices, and that's, of course, just adding to the way that we're doing our projects. And we're in a very qualitative part of construction. So we're dealing with associations. We understand that we represent the associations and all the shareholders. So the educational part of that is extremely, it's changed. It's changed the way that we do business, and I think that it's going to be like this for many years to come. And we hope to be pioneers into the way that I'm leading construction companies, especially in the condo association world. We do a lot of work in high rises. So, you know, our interior projects, we do zip walls. Everyone has to wear booties. Everyone's wearing face coverings. And then we try to keep it as encapsulated as possible. And educating, if we're working in indoor projects, it's just, you know, a challenge, but it's something that, you know, we all have to overcome. We're not going to be, you know, taken over by this. We're just going to have to change the way that we do things. So that was the end of my my slideshow. I think we're gonna open this up now to questions. Oh, we can't hear you, Ash.
I did unmute myself, but okay.
There you go.
Now. Perfect. Thank you, Robert. We do have a few questions. I think you already touched on them, but possibly elaborate a little. The first question up is, how does this affect your project workflow?
We did go into this a little bit. So a lot of it goes into planning before we start a project. That determines our individualized game plan for each one of the projects. So if you're doing a facade project, it's a little bit different than if you're doing an interior corridor project. So the rollout of the job beforehand and setting the expectation for not only the shareholders, which are the owners, but also for the expectation for our own team and anyone who's going to be working on the job site. So it just changed a little bit of timing. From behind the scenes, it's been a little bit more challenging. And then coming up with the expectation and rolling it out into the projects and putting it into our Gantt charts. And then, of course, educating the shareholders of, hey, this is what to expect, when to expect it. So they're not blindsided. So they're not going back to the management companies and saying, why is Regal in here doing this job? I don't feel comfortable. Instead of saying, well, between 9 and 11 o'clock, you're going to expect Regal to be there. So please, if you're going to be coming out into the hallway, wear a face covering. They're going to be wearing a face covering. So it's just the educational aspect of it and the rollout and coming up with the game plan.
Okay, and then there is one more question. How do you ensure or build confidence with clients throughout this uncertain time? Again, I think you touched on that, but
yeah, well, we touched on it a little bit, but it's just keeping consistent and rolling out exactly what we're setting the expectation as. So I'm not sitting here talking and saying, oh, we're going to wear respirators, we're going to wear face masks, we're going to wear booties, and then you go there and they don't come with booties or a zip wall. So it's just meeting and managing expectations and ensuring the accountability on our team members.
Okay, thank you, Robert. That's it for now. If anyone has any other questions, though, please type them into the question box, and we will come back to Robert at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Joe Choba. Joe Choba is principal of WilkinGuttenplan, has been with the firm since 2002. Joe divides his time between working with clients in the real estate industry and closely held businesses. As part of his real estate expertise, Joseph works with a multitude of CIRAs throughout New York and New Jersey. His work with them include audits, compilations, forecasts, and consulting. He also assists real estate clients with sponsored transition procedures and project management. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Angela. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I think we have a great group of panelists with a combination of maintenance, management, and also mission in engineering to talk about funding your replacement funds. And all of those things are really important when it comes to budgeting. So we're going to talk a little bit about how those are interconnected and some of the things that you can do and just general budgeting concepts, some of the keys to effective budgeting, and also some of the tough budgeting areas. Before I get to it, I just have a couple brief slides. I know we don't have a lot of time to go through too much material in too much detail, but we'll definitely hit some of the highlights. But just a little bit about myself and the firm. WilkinGuttenplan was started in the early 80s and one of the niche areas that we focused on is condos, HOAs, and co-ops, and the community living. And right now we are, I'm not sure the exact number, but we're roughly around 1,000 communities that we service on an annual basis, primarily New York and New Jersey. Our largest market is New Jersey, but we also do have an office in Manhattan. And our properties range from out to Eastern PA up to some in Connecticut, all the way down to some large communities in Virginia. So we do quite a bit of this, and this time of year is one of the times where we get a lot of questions about budgeting. Budgeting is one of the key components to managing your finances for a community association. It all starts with the budget. So with the budget, with proper budgeting, that's the basis for effective and quality financial management for your association. So we're going to start with a few things. I made note of a few of the top, in my mind, some of the top keys to effective budgeting. So some of the things on here, like number 5, not to skip around, but I'm not going to spend too much time on adequately funding reserves. I'm going to leave that to Mitch. Mitch has also been doing this for a long time, and he's a great resource for helping communities plan and adequately fund reserves, and I'll let him get into a little bit more detail on that. But one of the keys, just whether you're in these trying times with COVID-19 and the pandemic that we're all finding new ways to live our lives and do business, but just in general, planning ahead, gathering information early, gathering your contract information early for the upcoming year, planning your reserve study and having your reserve study updated, and getting that information updated so you're always working on the most current information, and plan ahead. I think, people, I think, and board members and even managers, I think sometimes they get into a routine where they really look at this last quarter of the year or quarter of your fiscal year as budgeting season. But I like to guide my boards in a different way and think that you're always in budgeting season. You're always learning more information each year, every day, every month, that you're managing your association and you're gathering information that could aid you in budgeting for the next season. So in my mind, I know managers don't like it's tough with managers because it's usually when your information gathering is towards the end of the year, but I like to look at it and keep in the mindset that the entire year you're constantly in budgeting season. You should always be trying to gather information that's going to help you make effective, sound financial decisions going forward. So plan ahead and start early. Think long-term and short-term. So I know when we're preparing a budget, we're really preparing a budget for the next 12 months or the next fiscal year that we're entering into. And that's great. Those are the immediate needs and the immediate challenges and the immediate problems that need to be solved as far as short-term budgeting and making sure that you're charging adequate maintenance fees over the next 12 months. But I think similar mindset as number 1 in planning ahead and always being in budgeting season is thinking long-term. And now a lot of times when you think long-term in terms of a budget, you automatically draw to funding your reserves, your long-term capital reserves, your long-term plan to fund those capital projects. But I would also think that you should be thinking maybe more of a midterm, but longer term in as far as the operating expenses are concerned. Now, the operating expenses are your expenses that, all of the expenses that are incurred and whatever it takes to operate the building on an annual basis. So thinking long-term may try to look out 1 to 5 years and try to determine what your expected, or try to anticipate what your operating expenses may be over the next few years, rather than just looking at it over the next 12 months and plan for those types of items. Now, one of the budgeting tools that that boards have available to them is called the Deferred Maintenance Fund. Now, I often see financial statements and condo associations operating without a deferred maintenance fund. And that's fine if there aren't specific needs for a deferred maintenance fund. But I do like to see a deferred maintenance fund because it does help you plan for those longer term operating items and budget for them and spread those items out over a longer period of time. And real quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar with a deferred maintenance fund, a deferred maintenance fund is a budgeting tool for operating expenses that are not incurred every year. So one of the common operating expenses or maintenance type items would be, if you have common hallways, would be painting of those hallways. Obviously, you're not going to paint the hallways every year. If you have a large enough community, you're not going to paint those hallways every year. Maybe you do paint a little bit each year, but let's say you do a building every 3 to 4 or 5 years. So rather than incurring the full expense in the year that you actually perform the painting maintenance, what you would do if that's a large enough expense is just spread that expense out through the budget each year over the term of that expense. So if you do it every 5 years, each year for 5 years, you're putting away some money each year so that in year 5 you have enough money to do the painting. Similar to a replacement fund, but these are for operating expenses. So I do like to look at things in long-term and short-term and mid-term as far as the deferred maintenance fund goes. Another pitfall I see boards fall into sometimes is not addressing unexpected events in a timely manner. And things like, you know, in this area of the world, I feel like every few years we're talking about snow and being over budget in snow. So I just use that as an example, but it really could be anything. So anything that's unexpected that causes you to go over budget or create a deficit, address those deficits or those items that are often outside the control of the board and are truly unexpected. Address them in a timely manner. The longer that you let those go or the longer that you don't address them, the harder it is to recover or to address them, because then hopefully it's not the case, but often you're on to the next unexpected item 2 or 3 years from now, and if you haven't properly addressed the event that caused you to go over budget, then it'll be harder to address all of the issues that you have. So, you know, I have Regal property maintenance here, Regal Restoration, I apologize. And I think they're an important piece to managing the association finances. Now, I know when we talk about property maintenance, it's not exactly the budgeting or the financial aspect, but I think those two are interconnected, because in order to have sound financials, I think your physical property needs to be properly maintained. I see often that when the physical property is not properly maintained, then that causes budgeting or financial issues in order to now incur the cost to fix the common property, and vice versa. If you're not properly budgeting or managing your finances, then often I see communities struggle with trying to fund proper preventative maintenance of the common property. So those two are absolutely interconnected, and it's super important to make sure that your physical property is properly maintained in order to maintain quality financials. The next, again, adequately fund reserves. I can't say this enough. And again, I'll touch on a couple things really quickly, but I know Mitch will get into much more detail on how to go about adequately funding reserves. But I can't stress enough the importance of having your study updated periodically and doing your best to implement the engineer's recommendations for funding reserves. Funding reserves is extremely important. Inadequate reserves, you know, oftentimes leads to special assessments or having to go out to a bank to obtain financing for projects, and it often has boards making tough decisions on how to approach a project, and they may not financially be able to do a project in the way that they would like to have it done for budgeting and financial reasons. So adequately fund reserves, can't stress that enough. And the last here is being realistic. I often taking everything above into account, and I often see a common thing, and this may be common now in the environment that we're in, is to try and keep maintenance fees low or consistent over a period of time. All I can say is that be realistic about what it costs to operate the property on an annual basis when you're budgeting. Be realistic about the services that your community provides to your owners and what it costs to provide those services. So I don't like to see boards sacrifice any of the things listed above, or things like proper property maintenance and adequately funded reserves may be two of the top ones that end up being sacrificed if maintenance fees are not enough to support the expenses of the association. So it's very important to be realistic. I'm not sure how we're doing with time, Angela, but I'll go through a couple of the quick, tough budgeting areas of 2020.
Another minute? Is that good, Joe?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll quickly go through these and then we can touch on a couple questions. But just to start, bad debt expense, that's always a common area that may be overlooked, and budgeting for unit owners that aren't able to pay their maintenance fees. Deficit reduction and surplus carryover, those are important. Again, those go back to my last point of addressing issues and addressing them timely, and how to handle deficit reduction and surplus carryforwards. Debt service cost, budgeting for long-term capital projects and the financing, the bank financing, and the costs associated with the bank's financing. Annual allocation to the replacement fund, of course, Mitch is going to touch on that. And making sure that you capture all of your other income items, and capturing other potential sources of income that could supplement the budget is important. Okay. So I know we don't have a lot of time. I could spend probably an hour on each one of these points that you have in front of you, but I know we are a little bit pressed for time. So maybe, Angela, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to field some questions.
Yep. Yes, Joe, there are a few questions. Thank you. So the first one, should we be issuing credits for surpluses that arise from reduction in expenses due to COVID-19?
Yeah, this is a common question that we've received in the last couple of months, because it's unfortunately we have unit owners that look and see, oh, well, I can't use the pool, I'm not allowed to go into the clubhouse. There's amenities that I can't use right now. So should I be getting a refund in my maintenance fees? So I look at this, and the way I answer that is I think it should be let's see how the year plays out, because what I think unit owners don't always see is maybe the other potential costs that have come up as a result of COVID-19. Maybe there may be some unanticipated maintenance items or cleaning practices that need to spend money on for the clubhouse. There's a whole host of other things that could arise from this COVID-19. And the way I would look at surpluses is similar to the way, again, I use snow as an example just because it's such a common line item where you'll be over budget one year and under budget the next. So when we look at some expenses that are under budget this year, I think it should just be considered as part of the budget process and evaluating what the overall condition is and the overall surplus or deficit is at the end of the year, and preparing the budget for the next year, and not necessarily saying, okay, we're going to refund you for this line item or this line item. I think the entire budget and the entire financial statements need to be looked at as a whole, and use that information when they're preparing the budget for the next year.
Okay, thanks, Joe. One more question.
Sure.
Should we budget for additional insurance or potential costs associated with COVID-19?
So this is along the same lines as, but it's really the opposite. Rather than a surplus in in certain line items, there are also some other potential costs associated with it. So so the first thing I started with was plan ahead, and we're always in budget season. And this is a perfect example of always being in budget season. So I think it's really important for boards and management to keep your professionals involved, and one of them obviously is your insurance professional. So when something like this comes up, talk to your insurance professional, see if there's any other coverage that may be needed. Talk to your to somebody like Robert about different maintenance types items, or some of the things that we could be doing today that's going to help us next year. What are some of the things that we could be preparing for? Same thing with Mitch and Vince with management. What are some of the things that we can do now to help us in the future, both long-term and short-term? And I think when it comes to insurance or other potential costs, it's hard to answer that specifically, because I know every community is different and every community has different needs, and every community provides different amenities and different services to their unit owners. So I just answer that with talk to your professionals. Always be constantly gathering information that's going to help you for your budget next year. Don't wait until the last quarter or the last couple months to gather this information. If something new that comes up that's unexpected, involve your professionals and make sure that you're gathering the proper information so that you know whether you need to budget for additional costs in the next year.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Stay well, everyone, and talk to you soon.
Okay, again, if there are any other questions at the end for Joe, please feel free to type them into the question box and we'll come back to him. Next, we have Mitch. Mitch Frumpkin is past president of multiple CAI chapters as well as a national organization. He chaired the national committee which developed the National Reserve Study Standards of the Community Association Institute as well as the Reserve Specialist designation. He recently co-chaired the national task force that updated these standards. He co-authored the book Reserve Studies and Reserve Investment Strategies as well as the best practices paper on reserves. He also chaired committees which developed the best practices paper on transition, which he is currently updating. Mitch teaches classes throughout the country on reserve studies, as well as many other topics, such as 2 advanced level CAI classes, Managing Developing Communities, which is based on the best practices paper on transition and high-rise management. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you. And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, because I can't see you, so if my time's up, you're gonna have to say it because I've lost you guys.
Okay.
And I'd like to, of course, thank Joe, my good friend, because when he was talking about reserve studies, he's thrown out 2 questions for me. One that is relatively easy to answer, which is part of my presentation, and the other one which is not so easy to answer. The one had to do with deferred maintenance, and the other one had to do with adequacy, because everybody talks about the term adequacy and everybody has a different definition of what adequate funding actually means. So I'll touch on that also. So what I'm going to talk about a little today is, as Angela mentioned, and by the way, this is a great program that CAI puts on every week, these type of forums. And as she mentioned, I've been involved in the development of national standards. And the first point I want to make is that the national standards, like a building code, are the minimum standards. When you do a reserve study, if it's in conformance with the national standards, you're getting a reserve study that meets the standards, but it's the minimum things that need to be included in that study. So what I'm going to be talking today about is what's the basis for the study, which is the slide you see right now, but also what are the things that are missing from the study that you should really consider asking for, and also what happens usually is somebody will call us up, as they do with other firms, and say, I'd like you to give me a proposal for a reserve study, but they don't give you an RFP, a request for proposal, that actually talks about what you're looking for, and they just rely on the engineer or the reserve provider to make an interpretation of what they're looking for. So I'm also going to talk for a few minutes about how to ask for an RFP and what to ask for. So the first slide you see is what is a reserve study? It's made up of 2 parts, the physical analysis and the financial analysis. Now, I think you could see my point here, because the physical analysis is really the basis for the entire study. And it starts with the left-hand column. It's the selection of the components to be included in the study. So it's really based on taking a look at the common elements, description of the common elements for your community, and making a determination of which one of those common elements will require replacement within 30 years is the guideline that's used in the industry. So if you go out 30 years, which one of your components will require replacement? Then this physical analysis essentially just says, how much will it cost to replace it? When will you need to replace it in terms of estimated remaining useful life, which is done by going out and looking at it typically, as well as how much will it cost to replace it and how much you set aside per year. That's the physical analysis. The thing to keep in mind is the component list is critical because the entire study could be right, but you get the components wrong, so it's wrong. So very critical part of it. The second part is the financial analysis. So essentially what you're doing in the financial analysis is, you can see my pointer, you have money that's set aside to that point in time, and you're saying, okay, if I am funding every one of the components based on a 30-year cash flow projection, this is what it looks like. You're accumulating money. Wherever you replace something, the line drops down. So that's what it looks like. It's a cash flow projection. And these are the various types of funding plans that are used. This, to me, is the most critical part of the study. For a board and a manager and an accountant to see these funding plans can help make a decision for your community what is adequate. And what I mean by adequate, to go back to Joe's question, is that this top line, the blue line, is called full funding. Do not be misled by the term full funding, because in my mind, full funding in most instances is overfunding your study. So you add all the components together, how much it costs to replace them, and you add it all up, and this is the blue line going out in a projection for 30 years. Now let's do something and say, okay, if it says to do full funding, you should set aside $100,000 per year. What happens if you reduce that to the point where you get the green line? This is called baseline funding, which means you've reduced your annual contribution, so at some point in the future, it drops down to zero in the account. The most risky way to do it is baseline funding. The most conservative way to do it is full funding. What's in between there is what's known as threshold funding, where you establish the lowest point you want your projection to go through to in the next 30 years, and that's what you use. That low point is what determines for your community what you consider to be adequate funding. So you could have two communities right next to each other, and just because of the risk tolerance of one versus the other, and one will say, my threshold is baseline funding all the way to zero, or somebody else will say, we need full funding, that's our risk tolerance, but most communities are somewhere in the middle. Some people say it should be based on some type of percentage. I don't agree with that, because every community is different and it's their risk tolerance. In some states, I have to mention this, in some states, they have statutory requirements. In New Jersey, where we're from, there are no statutory requirements for communities doing reserve studies, but there is a statutory requirement that says that if the developer is developing a community, in the initial budget, it has to include adequate reserves. Now, for many, many years, that term adequate was not defined, and because of that, there was controversy between associations and developers about underfunding of reserves in the public offering statement. So what's happened in the last couple of years is CAI, the Builders Association, and the Department of Community Affairs has met many, many times and have come up with a recommendation where those standards should be changed in the next few months to actually include a definition of adequacy. What the definition is, that you should not run into a position over a 30-year projection period where the fund drops below zero. So the definition of adequate is essentially going to say that baseline funding, if you don't run into a deficit, is adequate. So keep in mind that is going to be there. That was determined by CAI, DCA, and the Builders Association, but there is going to be a definition. On the national level, it's essentially the same definition. You shouldn't have to have a special assessment or borrow money to replace your common elements, but again, baseline funding is the most risky, and I would stay away from it. So this is just the background of what a reserve study is. The basic standard is it should include a physical analysis and a financial analysis. The other thing I suggest, which is very interesting in the financial analysis, is when you get your study, don't only ask them to show you full funding and baseline funding, but also ask them, the provider, to show you what happens if you continue to contribute to your reserves the way you are now. Because as soon as you see a graph where it says continuing the way you do it now and it drops below zero, you know you're in trouble. So graphically, this is the key to the study, the most important part. So what are the types of study? There's a full study, and this again is based on the national standard. There's a full study where you select the components, you calculate the quantities, you do everything, and you prepare a study. What most people ask for these days is an update of a study that they previously had. And there's some danger zones there, which I'm going to talk about. But an update with a site visit means that you're taking a study somebody else prepared, you're assuming all the components are correct, you're assuming all the quantities are correct, and you go out to look at them to evaluate the condition, to establish a remaining life for the components based on the condition. You change the beginning balance, and that's what it does. What it doesn't do, I'm going to talk about in a second, what's missing from that, and why, if you just ask for somebody to provide you with a reserve update based on the national standards, there are some critical things missing. But that includes a site visit to go look at it. Next is an update with no site visit. All you're doing is taking the old study, not going out and looking at conditions, and you're adjusting the remaining useful life just based on its age. These are generally done if you want to make some changes to see if you have the money to do it, but typically the updates are done with a site visit. The last one is a preliminary study. The national standards were just updated in the last couple of years. This was not in them before, and this relates to if you're doing a reserve study for the governing documents of a community that's not built yet, it's called a preliminary study. Big difference is you can't go out to look at it because it's not built yet. So what's included on the study and what the components are based on just looking at the drawings because it's not built yet. So those are the types of studies that are out there. So now let's talk about what is left out. All right, typically, as I mentioned, when you do a reserve study, the standard is that you do a cash flow projection going out 30 years, and all components that require replacement within that 30-year period are included in this study. So this is what it looks like. You start this year and you have a component. What happens if that component has, as in this case, a 35-year life, not less than 30 years? So when you're updating the studies, you're updating the study to only include what's been on it in the beginning, things that fall within that 30-year time frame, and not the components that go past it. So it's absolutely critical that as the communities age and you have an update done, you have to ask the provider to look at the components within your community, and anything that will require replacement within 30 years of when that study is done should be on the study, the update, and which in many instances, or in some instances, especially as communities get older, will mean that you are going to add components to the study. I have seen so many times that associations, managers ask, do an update of a study. Nobody considers the fact, most of the time, unless they come to its webinars like this, that there are components that should be added. So just imagine what happens. Now the community is 29 years old, you're updating a study, and there's something that's going to be replaced in 2 years that was never included. Very important that when you do updates to ask for components that now fall within that 30-year time frame be added to the study. What else is left out? Deferred maintenance. Joe mentioned this, it's absolutely critical. How many times do we see budgets that include reserves but don't include deferred maintenance? What happens if you have a road or something that's on your study that says it has a 20-year life? What's the intent of deferred maintenance? Deferred maintenance is to help you to make sure that you get the full useful life out of that component, because if the life is less, you're going to have to collect more money in a shorter period of time, which affects your budget. Deferred maintenance is critical. And you really, when you get a reserve study done, I know one management company that will only have reserve studies done if they include a deferred maintenance schedule. They're absolutely critical to have to be done. They're not part of the standards, so there's something that's left out when you do a reserve study to make sure that the reserve study works. What else is left out? Evaluation of the components. When you do an update, what it's doing is it's taking the components that are in the original study and updating them, but leaving them as they are. For example, I'm going to give you 2 examples. If there's a wood fence may have a $75,000 replacement cost, but you're missing something with the wood fence because it's not just the replacement cost, it's the maintenance where, let's say, you have to stain it every 5 years so it attains its full useful life. So your study will say, okay, we're going to leave on the reserve study a wood fence. But what happens if you change that wood fence and you replace it with, let's say, a vinyl fence? The vinyl fence now has a 30-year life or a 40-year life, so it's much longer life, but you don't have to paint it every 5 to 10 years. And at the same time, you are getting rid of the maintenance cost. So in this example I've shown here, which I'm not going to go through in detail, you could be saving $7,000 a year, even though the vinyl fence may cost you slightly more than the wood fence. So you really have to take a look at what you're replacing them with, but it's only going to happen if you ask for that. The other more critical example has to do with mechanical equipment, especially with high rises. The cost of energy can be much, much more than the cost of replacement. So you really should ask for what I call life cycle analysis or a green reserve study, these type of things, where you're taking the replacement cost plus the energy cost and saying when it comes time to replace it, let me replace it with a high efficiency piece of equipment rather than a standard piece of equipment, because it may cost you a few $1,000s more for the equipment because it's higher efficiency, but at the same time, you're saving significantly more than that increase in replacement cost and energy cost. Very, very important if you have mechanical equipment. I mentioned a website down here, dsireusa.org. The thing to do, look at that website because it also tells you what incentives are available. In the state of New Jersey, there are huge incentives for energy efficient upgrades. You're going to get an incentive for something, but they're not asking you to give them reserve funds. So you make a killing by getting incentives to replace the equipment for high efficiency, save on energy. The programs are going to pay for it, and you still have the reserve funds set aside. So the other thing that's missing is looking at the energy cost. You need to take into account the replacement cost, the maintenance cost, and the energy cost. And it's very rare that that's done, and it's missing. All right, now, so to take this into account, I'm sorry?
Mitch, about a minute left. Okay.
All right, so to take this into account, when you ask for a reserve study, my suggestion is you really need to ask for not just the standard reserve study, I want to update with a site visit, whatever. You need to also say, I want you to look at the components that you're replacing with to see if there's any life cycle cost savings. I want you to look to see if any components should be added to the study because now they fall into that 30-year time window. But I promise you, if you don't ask for this, you're not going to get it. So with that, I'm assuming that we'll give you copies of these presentations. But the thing to keep in mind is that when you're asking for a reserve study, ask for it and do it in writing by preparing an RFP that describes exactly what you want over and above the standards or the standards, if that's all you're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. We do have a question for you.
Okay. You're back.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you and see you.
Okay. As the physical assets are huge part of the community, are there any things that you would recommend to be done in addition to the reserve study to help communities maintain their property values?
Absolutely. First of all, keep in mind it is property values because these do maintain the property values. You're setting aside the money to spend it, not to just keep it in an account. So you really need to do, I would say, some type of visual inspection each year of your community just to look at the condition of it. Because just because a reserve study says seal coat a road in 3 years, if the seal coat is fading after 1 or 2 years, you don't need an engineer to tell you that. Just have the manager or somebody walk around to take a look at the community and maybe make adjustments to the reserve study to reflect that or your budget.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much, Mitch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Vincent. Vincent Rapolo of Denali Property Management has been in the community association management industry for 15 years. During this time, Vincent has made his way through the industry as a property administrator, property manager, general manager, and now assumes the role of director of field operations for Denali Property Management. Welcome, Vincent.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Did I lose my screen? Can you see my PowerPoint there? Let's see if I don't have it.
We can see it.
Oh, but I can't. I was going to read off it. So, give me a second. Interesting. Sorry, guys, I can't see my own PowerPoint. That's what I was going to work off of.
Hey, Vincent, if you're working on two
Here we go.
screens, are you on
I've
two?
got it over here. Here we go.
Oh,
So,
okay.
good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about that delay. My name is Vincent Rapola, and I'm working with Denali Property Management. I'm the Director of Field Operations. A little bit about Denali Property Management. We're a New Jersey-based company founded in 2001, and we specialize in the management of residential, commercial, and rental properties of all sizes in the tri-state area. Our friendly professional team, our experience in bookkeeping, accounting, building systems, and operations and constructions. We are committed to providing a customized range of property management service to best fit your needs. Denali, meaning the high one, towers above the rest, providing each client, regardless of our side, and then lost us again. Where did I go? Sorry, y'all. I keep losing my screenshot here. How do
We
you
can
get back?
see it. Want us to do it?
Can you see? I cannot. Yeah, bitch, you want to do it?
Vincent, if you'd like, we can just not share the screen and not use the PowerPoint so you can see it, if that works.
All right, we can do that. Yeah.
Are you able to see yours now?
Here we go. Good. All right, so today I've had the topic of managing public relations, resident expectations from a management company perspective. So I started this, it was unique with public relations and, what exactly is public relations? The definition of public relations is the professional maintenance of a favorable public image by a company or other organization or a famous person. And would you ever have thought of yourself as a PR professional? After seeing that definition and working in this industry, we can now officially, as property managers, put this on our resumes. When managing a community association, we are managing the homes and images of the owners. The way the public perceives a community can have a tremendous effect on the residents' personas and home values. The way our community sees management and the board and even themselves is very important in our effectiveness and even productivity as property managers and board members. The more we gain the trust of our community, the less we are ultimately hear feedback from members of the community when there is an issue or emergency on the property and how it was handled. Here are some ways we can be effective in managing the expectations and overall public relations on a property. When managing public relations and resident expectations when there is a major event on a property. The key to this is always staying in front of the incident. What does that mean? Communicate as much as possible and frequently. This will cut down on resident inquiries. If there is a major loss, get in touch with all residents that are affected and let other residents in the building know they are not affected. For example, if there is a major leak in the west wing of a building, advise the entire building that it is in the west wing on the A-line bathrooms. This will help in avoiding calls and chatter from the entire building. It's never too late. When something goes wrong and you may be a bit behind the issue, it is never too late to get back on track and then in front of the issue. Constant communication. It's never too little of an issue to give a heads up. If we hear of a water main break, providing the link to the water companies, even if not in your area, will be very important if the water goes brown. Also, if there was a slight altercation in the lobby, notice to the residents is always helpful. Again, manage expectations. In managing public relations and resident expectations between management, the board, and residents. One key is do not put the board and residents against each other. Associations are governed by rules and regulations and governing documents. It's nothing personal. Make sure that residents are fully aware of how the association business is governed. Let them know there is a process and a procedure that is followed. Budget season can always be a point of contention between residents and the board, especially if maintenance is increased. Provide detailed explanations on why decisions were made. Everything in this world increases. Providing some contractual detail goes a long way. Use your CAI statistics to show industry standards. This will show that there are industry benchmarks that you, as the professional manager, are using to provide informed decisions to the board. A great example is using reserve studies and operating account balance recommendations from industry professionals like Joe and Mitch. This will eliminate a why and because type conversation. A big issue I see is managers always saying it's the board and shrugging their shoulders when posed with difficult questions. This is not good. I found that when you ride the fence, you will fall on the fence. Remember, these folks all live in communities together, and at some point, they will run into each other in the elevator, at the pool, and will begin to speak about you. When the communication in the community breaks down, we then begin to see large turnouts at the open meetings. Bad sides, and again, manage expectations. When we manage public relations and resident expectations in relation to repairs and upgrades, be honest and factual. As much as the facts hurt to say, or you know that a resident is not going to like what you say, it's always going to be better in the end. Of course, we do not want to be that blunt. By being honest and upfront, it'll save a lot of drama at the end of a project or repair. Again, provide benchmarks for reference to residents. Provide details of why we cannot get the work started. It may be weather related, material related, but be sure to provide the facts. Robert made mention of that earlier. Provide reasonable timelines. I always tell my communities that if you want to start a project in 1 year, we better have already started the engineering specifications today. Communication and manage expectations are key. Managing our public relations and resident expectations in relation to social media and media. As we know, social media has made our jobs nearly impossible. The speed at which social media and media moves has made our jobs very difficult. I never signed up to be a public figure, but sometimes I have surely felt that way. We could be enjoying a Saturday afternoon with friends and family, and you get a message that the community Facebook page is running over an incident in the lobby or mailroom, or there's a leak somewhere in the building. How can we possibly stay ahead of a situation that has already ran on social media? This goes back to the point I made earlier that it's never too late to get on top of it. One anecdote was an incident where I was on my way home and started to receive text messages and calls from friends and family about a building I was managing. There was a resident who was arrested at the building. The news agencies got into the building and started to interview residents. We kindly asked them to leave the building. I thought nothing of it. Next thing I know, the building and myself are now hitting major news feeds. It's amazing when you hit those news feeds, the things you didn't say, they say you said. Also, when dealing with social media, let's be careful what we say. Remember, everything that is posted is posted. As a board member or manager, it's easy to get caught up in the drama if incorrect online posts, but we cannot. Assign a board member or member of the community to monitor and mediate. This person can gently direct message residents and provide a little more in-depth information on a subject matter that they may not already know. When managing public relations and resident expectations, image and meeting materials are very important. Appearance goes a long way. Dressing the part is important. Remember, we are professional business consultants. Present clear, concise, and organized management reports, especially at open meetings. Perception can be everything. Show your CAI licensing after your name. This will go a long way in building confidence in our communities. In closing, when we manage public relations and resident expectations, there's always a silver lining to all of this. When there's a catastrophe, it is really the time for yourself, the board, and your organization that you work for to shine and show off all the skills you have attained over the course of your career. It's real, you got this minute. The role of a property manager and board member is all about building trust and relationships within our community. People have very short memories, and if we can continuously communicate, stay ahead of a problem, trust will be earned, and I assure you the overall call volume and emails when things do happen will begin to slow very quickly. Oh, And that's all I got for you guys.
Thank you, Vincent. We have a few questions for you. The
Sure.
first one, how do you best diffuse an irate homeowner?
First thing I do is I try to level with the irate homeowner, ask them, do not take it personally. We deal with irate homeowners every day. And one of the things I've learned, and it's not me, you can't take it personally. You want to try to level with that homeowner, get out, why are they upset, and try to manage their expectations and give them the facts of what had happened or why the violation happened, or that we are just doing our jobs, and provide as many details as possible. And you don't know, they're irate at you right now, and it's not because of you, and it's not because of the incident. It's probably because of what happened earlier in the morning with their child, or in traffic, and now it's just coming out on you. So we have to take that, and we have to really focus on that it's not you, it's not this instance, it's what may have happened to lead to that irateness. And then by the end of the conversation, we're friends usually.
Okay, one more question. What steps can you suggest to proactively calm an anticipated heated board member or homeowners meeting?
One of the things I've been able to leverage is that social media. Sometimes that social media can run on you and be your worst enemy, but sometimes if you have residents who are constantly on that social media and they're telling you what's going on, you can really stay ahead of what's going to come to you at that meeting, because everyone's showing their hand on social media. So we can proactively be ready to answer the questions that are going to be thrown at us.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions we have today. If anyone attending today has other questions, please email them to either myself or info@CAI-NJ.org, and we will definitely be able to get you in contact with the speakers. We have, just a reminder, we have committee signups out there now. So if you'd like to be in a committee for 2021, please go to our website and submit your application for a committee. And we are also looking for board members for 2021. So if anyone's interested in submitting an application for consideration to be on our board, we are looking for all member representation groups. So please do submit your application. And lastly, managers needing a certificate for CEUs, please email Jackie at Jacqueline, JACLYN @CAI-NJ.org. Thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you speakers.
Thank you.
And see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.